Well, hello and welcome to A Star to Steer Her by 10 Forward number 41, where we will be discussing Star Trek. What does that mean? Well, depending on how much of last week's outro I cut, because I rambled like an idiot.
Just put it here. Here's the explanation for what we're doing right now. Segue to Chris.
Now I might have to do that.
Ames is still writing a screenplay.
And then put in Caitlin's response to Trip dying again.
I didn't actually do that. What are we doing? And I'll cut this if I did do that.
This
is all very confusing.
You put them both in, just like, fuck it.
We are gonna just sort of talk about the original, for lack of a better term, run of Star Trek from 1966 to 2004, five.
Wow.
As sort of a whole, the what I've dubbed the terrestrial era.
Classic Trek. Classic era Trek.
Yeah. Well, that's where it gets confusing, because most people, you say classic Trek, they think specifically TOS, but now we're using it to sort of mean...
Right.
All that shit.
So that's why, for lack of a better term, I've dubbed it the terrestrial era. Eventually the fandom will decide on something.
Non-streaming...
Yeah.
Linear era.
Linear, thank you. Yes, linear era Trek.
But Enterprise is a prequel.
Yeah,
We haven't introduced ourselves yet.
Good point.
Shit.
Good point. This is Chair.
This is Ames.
This is Caitlin.
Jane.
So, yeah. You know, we are doing this because it's an idea I had. I thought, hey, let's do this because a little behind the scenes, we had thought about maybe giving ourselves a little bit of a buffer by discussing the 3 seasons of The Orville. But then Seth MacFarlane had to go and say, actually, maybe I'm doing a season 4.
It wasn't even him. It was Scott Grimes who played...
Damn you, Grimy!
Helmsman on the ship.
Oh, you ginger fuck!
He is my favorite, so he's allowed. That's a lie. Isaac's my favorite.
He lives above a bowling alley and below another bowling alley. So yeah. Unfortunately for you all, I'm in charge, which means I have very vague sort of structural concepts, whereas Ames would have had something much, much better.
No big board today, huh?
No,
I love the big board.
You do. I'm not one for visual aids.
Easy to put on the Tumblr.
True. And what also works about this, I came up with the idea before we recorded our Enterprise finale, but Caitlin will be able to get some words in about the end of Enterprise as well, since she couldn't be here that week because she almost died saving Archer, even though he didn't deserve it.
No.
So what I wanted to start with was a very broad sort of thing, and that is lasting takeaways. By which I mean, when you think back now on the individual series, what is something that stuck with you, remains with you? What is... You know, or if someone's like, well, what is that show? Someone who somehow doesn't really know it. What would you say about it? Or anything of that sort. Like, don't get too specific about storylines or characters or anything like that. Just the feeling it evokes, for lack of a better term. And we will just go in show order.
So series by series?
Yeah.
Okay,
We'll start with TOS. And if you end up linking it as you go, you know, like, try to keep it to the show, but don't hamstring yourself, because especially when we get to the 90s, there's so much overlap. So let's start with Ames.
And TOS?
Yeah, what does TOS mean to you? Or what part of your brain lights up when you hear the words in the MRI?
Campy Sausage Fest.
Chris, you're doing like a kind of a Jiminy Glick thing, like a Jiminy
Yes!
Glick light. Jiminy what? Caitlin, please do the honors.
I gotta think of something. It goes, what do you think of Star Trek? I can't. I'm on the spot. That was nothing like Jiminy Glick.
You're right, Lou.
We've been watching a lot of Star Trek lately, and I just what makes you think of when you think of the original series? You know, I spoke to my wife, and she said that the original series is her favorite.
I will say I was not going for that, but I'm
I'm
not upset that I wound up there.
I'm approving.
Well, you definitely have like a, you know, this is This American Life.
Yeah.
Like you've got like a serious interview thing going on, which is wild for this podcast.
True. But yes, Campy Sausage Fest.
Campy Sausage Fest, no navels on the women.
Hmm.
Women
Yeah.
don't get to have navels.
Well, that was, and we may have talked about this when we were talking about TOS, but that was just a weird thing 60 censors had.
Yeah, I Dream of Jeannie as well.
Yeah, they very famously covered her navel for most of the... I think they eventually let her show it. But yeah, the 60s had a weird thing about navels.
Yeah, like
I
you
don't
can
know
see,
why.
like the costumes, as we can look at the poster behind Chris and
Yeah,
Jake right now, there's a ton of costumes that are just like fully open sides on the women. And yet always, just as long as there's a stripe that's covering your navel, you're all set.
Yeah, and they could get away with way more side boob than you'd expect the 60s to get away with. But for somehow the navel was this forbidden thing, yeah.
You're thinking about the belly button hole, you start thinking about other holes, you just,
True.
you think, could I fit my dick in there?
Rick Berman
The answer's
definitely
probably
could.
no.
Anything else?
Anything else? I mean, you also think it's mostly the funner of the shows because of I think the era, and yet it does a great job at making sure it's also occasionally preachy.
Yes.
So yeah, it's an interesting balance because you think I'm going to have a good time and I'm going to watch an episode of Star Trek, and suddenly it's all why is this man's half of his face painted black and half painted white, and why do I feel like I'm being taught something today?
I forget what, it was one of the many fucking Facebook pages I follow, but someone was mentioning how, as someone who enjoys Star Trek but had never really seen TOS, they finally sat down and watched it. And they were like, because the public consciousness of Trek now is so much like, in all the parodies, are frequently more about the goofier aspects.
Yeah.
He's been shocked about how when they do actually get serious, it can be some really very good sort of stories and science fiction and storytelling and this and that. It's something that does suffer from its reputation in a way.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that the thing that Star Trek did, and I think why it has lasted in a lot of ways as long as it has, is up until that point, when you think of what was on television or films that was sci-fi, it was
Lost in Space.
Lost in Space, Tales of Interest, whatever.
Battlestar was on by then?
No,
that's
Battlestar
70s.
was late
Oh, really?
70s. Yeah,
Was it?
very late.
Post
70s.
Star Wars.
Yeah.
And Buck Rogers was later too, right? Also 70s or 80s?
The one we've watched, Buck Rogers as a character, has existed
Yeah.
since I want to say the 30s.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I'm
like a
thinking about the
radio
shows.
Yeah, that was
But
70s.
and you also had all those B movies from the 50s that were just not good.
Well, science fiction, by and large, obviously there were exceptions before Star Trek, but by and large was mostly thought of as children's entertainment.
Yeah, it was genre. I mean, it's kind of and it wasn't something that you would see on mainstream television. And Star Trek, in some ways, is not it's an evolution of that. It's not a total 180. There's still a lot of camp. There's still a lot of kid stuff in Star Trek, but I think it made science fiction and actual science fiction ideas something that was mainstream and accessible.
Yeah.
And it maybe didn't happen in the 60s. It may have happened in reruns.
Yeah, syndication
Yeah.
for sure.
That's a good point, yeah.
But the show itself was...
I should point out, as a slight correction, science fiction being for kids, I mean specifically for film and television.
Yeah.
Because obviously a lot of the literature...
Oh,
Books,
yeah.
comics.
The Ray Bradbury had been churning out his short stories and novels by then, and...
But even that, wasn't a lot of, mainstream sci-fi, weird pulpy shit with, bosomy women being abducted by creepy aliens on the front at that point, too?
Depends on the author, but yes,
But
it
yeah,
could
and
be.
the greats of sci-fi that you think of, they all wrote those too. It wasn't that wasn't
somebody's got to get paid,
Yeah, a lot of the a friend of mine a while back was I'm gonna read some of the the sci-fi canon really, and that was the one takeaway that he kept having was oh my god, this is the schlockiest misogynistic crap.
Yeah, the misogyny's largely inescapable with the old writers. But yeah, it sort of depends on the collection too, because I know I read various collections as a kid, and whoever edited them were ignoring the schlockier things. No, here's the more intellectual stuff. Still misogynistic as fuck, but there was less of the they strained out the goofier ones.
But anyway, I think Star Trek showed that you could do sci-fi on television that was accessible to kids and adults and enjoyable by kids and adults, and it had some really interesting science fiction ideas.
Remind me when 2001 came out.
1968.
Okay, because I know that was like a huge leap for when TOS movies came out. Was
Yeah.
look, it's possible. Look, we can jump on this and capitalize.
Yeah, that I think probably that was a watershed moment. Being very serious science fiction, and also, I mean, again, especially that's pre-Star Wars model work that looks fucking amazing.
Yeah, that stuff.
I've still never seen that. We should 10 forward that shit.
We should.
I'm not gonna
because
lie.
that movie is it's kind of it's in 4 parts that are very tenuously strung together in a theme, but each one is fascinating.
I've actually never seen it in full myself.
Oh my god.
Ooh, we should watch it.
It's one you definitely got to be kind of in the right headspace for. And one of the times it was on, I was like, I am sure I would enjoy this, but not right now.
Which headspace is that? Is it really bleak?
It's just very boring.
It's like TMP. It's exactly where Star Trek: The Motion Picture came from. Because they look at this movie and said, "Oh, look at all the cool effects. We can spend a half an hour looking at them."
It's just, I mean, I say boring. It's not boring. It's slow.
It's very thoughtful.
Yeah.
I think again, it's definitely what TMP was going for. TMP, despite the fact that the studio greenlit it because they're like, oh god, Star Wars is huge. Hey, we own Star Trek. The people writing the film were like, hey, that's great. We're going to make sort of a more mainstream 2001. And the studio went, I'm sorry, what? And they never let them do that again with the movies. Because then Wrath of Khan came out.
They just decided, no, people want action movies.
Yeah. And
we're not as good as Kubrick to make it work.
Yeah, I was going to say, you have to be a special person to do what Kubrick does.
One more pass in the editing bay, I think, could have saved that movie.
Just make it a screensaver on your desktop, and that's what that movie is.
Yeah.
My thing about TOS is that, when I think about a lot of the shows that came before and, a lot of the, creepy movies, like you were saying, from, the 50s and stuff, I feel like it's sort of, I don't know if it's unique in the fact that it's, very hopeful and very, more cooperative and less... we're at war with the whole world. Obviously there are outliers and there are, monsters of the week, but, ultimately, the Federation is there, they're going out to explore, they're, meeting new people, they're helping people, they're learning along the way. It's some kind of moral edutainment for, the entire family. I don't know. I look back and I like it.
Yeah,
it's cheesy as hell.
That's such a huge argument, and why so many people claim New Trek bad is because it doesn't have that hopeful message at the forefront. There's a lot that's super dark, and Starfleet is the villain, and whose story even is this? And a lot of people say that the tones aren't hopeful anymore, which can still make for good story. I think that's just what the difference in the eras are.
I've had thoughts about that I've been sort of building that I am saving for when we get to New Trek, because I think you kind of hit on it, that to my mind, I don't necessarily think that it's not there, it's just not there from the off. And the idea is whereas Trek 66 is more because what it was is that was made in an era where, again, not universal, and I don't have exhaustive knowledge of the science fiction at the time, but a lot of it, because it was, the Cold War, and it was being written by people just kind of out of World War II and all this, a lot of the fiction was sort of very pessimistic. There were a lot of stories about it's the end of the world, and the post-apocalypse, and nuclear war is coming, and this and that. So just saying that, no, we're gonna be fine in the long run, there's some hiccups on the way, World War III, eugenics wars, but we will overcome our baser instincts and survive and get better. And that was, if not, unique, at least it was one of the more mainstream things to say. That, again, wasn't just aimed at kids. The kids' science fiction was happy and peppy because it was for children.
Right.
Whereas this was just no, we're gonna actually say that maybe we'll be okay.
And, not just okay, but, the replicator would necessarily end world hunger. And again, the idea that, no, we're not being invaded by aliens that are going to blow up the White House. We're going out to see aliens and, learning what we can learn. And, they're not all good aliens, There are Gorns and Cardassians and...
Yeah, but there's also not all good humans either. They have the same flaws we do.
That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, because, I think, and that's maybe, I think, what people get hung up on sometimes is... just because Star Trek is about a better future doesn't mean that it's a perfect future.
Right.
And
It's not utopia.
yeah, because utopia inherently cannot. That's the whole idea of the fucking word. You know, like it means no place because it's impossible. And like, and also again, like if you don't have bad people, sometimes you're not going to have an interesting story.
Yeah. I also think something about TOS that is somewhat lost on maybe our generation, just because it's just part of our culture now, that was distinct at the time, was the diversity element.
Mhm.
Oh,
And that
yeah.
you had a cast that had, it had a black woman in a semi-prominent role. She was on the bridge.
Even if they cut so many of her
Even
lines.
if they cut so many of her lines.
So many.
Put
But
her in
still,
a
like
short
you
skirt and a
you're
weird
talking
diaper.
about, the mid '60s. You have a black woman on your ship who's part of the bridge crew and regularly interacting with other characters, and just not treated any differently, because of maybe treated differently because of her gender more than her race.
Yeah.
And and then you have a character like Sulu, Japanese, who's again mid '60s, just part of the crew. Later you add Chekhov,
Who has a bad wig.
who has a bad wig and a terrible accent.
And but a Russian during a very
During the
hot
Cold
period
War.
for the Cold War.
So it's like, yeah. So I think that was a message that they were selling with, and you just have to listen to going back to the horror thing. It was like the inspiration. Like, again, this is lost on us also because spoiler alert, we're all white. But if you hear like Whoopi Goldberg talk about how Star Trek inspired her as a young girl, and wanted her to get into acting, it's the reason why when she was an internationally known movie star, she like begged to have a recurring guest spot on TNG.
Yeah.
It's like, because that's how important it was to her.
Yeah, well, because it was, the quote from her famously is that, just seeing Uhura, she was a black woman who wasn't, like, a maid.
Yeah.
Or in some sort of service position. It only happened the once, but there's the episode where she actually is in the guts of her station fixing it.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think, especially because, it's coming out more now. There's that film a few years ago. The fact there were so many, not just women, but black women involved in...
Oh, you're talking about Hidden Figures?
Thank you. Yes,
in the
important work
space
for
program.
NASA and the space program.
Yeah.
So it was
Yeah.
trying to reflect reality a little bit more than television normally did. And, and again, it's like I said, we're used to it. And also the sort of the bad version of that has been done by less careful or less caring executives is tokenism, of course. And sometimes it gets blamed for creating tokenism. But at the time, it was genuinely just an attempt to have a more diverse cast, because trying to consciously have a more diverse cast in that era wasn't necessarily de rigueur.
Yeah, and it's yeah, I wouldn't say it invented token. I think
Well, no, but I think
we
it gets
got to
accused of that.
We got to the point where it was, oh shit, we don't have a black character in our thing. Let's just get one in there because we're gonna get shit if we don't, right? And that's tokenism.
Yeah, and then inevitably what they do is, rather than just writing that person as a person,
Yeah,
they wind up written as a bloody stereotype.
Mhm.
Sounds like Enterprise.
Yes!
But we'll get to that later.
Yes, that's kind of what Liz brought up for us a few weeks ago. Yeah, I think you all sort of hit on a lot of the major stuff I was thinking. I would say, too, part of the campiness, too, I think, is what we can't forget is not just that it was science fiction and late 60s television, that was just what you did. Like, a lot of the most successful stuff was just camp. Camp was very, very popular, like late 60s Batman.
I was going to say, bring it back to Ames's favorite topic, Adam West Batman.
Damn it.
But also, like, the Avengers, the British spy series, not the Marvel characters. Like, camp was just kind of what you did with 60s TV a lot.
Yeah, this was also when color TV was getting very big and getting more popular in households.
Mm-hmm.
And, they made their show very colorful to the point that sometimes you look at them, look at sets and look at it and say, this looks like a fucking circus.
Yeah. Well,
like,
and I think...
The sky is pink and the ground is green, and you're just doing this show that you're
And the world
showing...
is hollow and I have touched the sky.
And I have fucked the sky. And it's very much using their medium, but also like setting this tone that I think was getting big then. Yeah,
and I remember we probably discussed it at the time, but like part of the thing was when they went from the original pilot to the next one to Where No Man Has Gone Before. You'll notice that the bridge rail became red.
Yeah, they added the red engineering
uniforms
shirts.
and all that because the network was like, look, color TV's getting big. Throw a bit more because it was so very. The bridge was just all gray and black. You know, they added the red highlights, not just the rail, but a few of the panels. And yeah, the uniforms went from being just this sort of drab tan and sort of dull blue to like the gold and the red, and the blue got a bit brighter and all that. And of course, technically, those early uniforms were actually green, but the film correction turned them yellow.
Yeah, I'd love to see what they actually looked like, because that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I guess it was probably a little closer to the color of Kirk's like dress
shirt.
uniform and girdle
That's
shirt.
fascinating. Because everyone just associates it with gold now.
Yeah, exactly, and it's just sort of been retconned that that's what it always was.
I think it's a good choice, though. That green's not a great green.
No. But yeah, the cloth that the uniform, the dress uniform and the girdle shirt were made out of didn't suffer from the same effect with the color correction, which is why they didn't turn yellow.
I know, I've been doing this show for 8 years.
No, it's just for anyone listening who either forgot that we discussed this or
Go
missed
back there
those
and
episodes.
listen. Just kidding.
But for me, I think what I always come back to is the greatest explanation of TOS ever does come from Futurama. 80 episodes, about 30 good ones. But when they're good, they are very good. And even when they're not good, they're often entertaining.
Well, and also
but when they're bad, no.
The ones that they've told you are bad, though, also aren't always as bad as you think. Like,
True.
I feel like we went into season 3 thinking it was going to be a big stink fest. And, I mean, yeah, it wasn't maybe on the whole as good as the other seasons, but, like, I don't know. Isn't that the one that for the world is hollow and I've touched the sky?
Yeah.
Wasn't that that's a third season episode that I fucking love.
We all really liked the empath, from what I recall.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Yeah,
with what's her
one.
name, that was great. Like, and
Yeah,
and then
I
they
like
did
her.
that shit with just all black. It was an
Yeah.
all black fucking set, and it was really good. Like,
Yeah, and like some of the episodes, like you're saying, that we kind of expected to be the worst of the worst.
Spock's brain.
Like Spock's brain. It's not great. It's
No,
not.
it's
not
dumb
gonna-
as
it's
fuck.
not-
no, but it's not the worst.
But it's far from the worst episode of TOS. Like there's I don't. Did it even make any of our top or bottom fives?
I
for
don't
the
remember,
series?
to be honest.
I don't remember. It's been a long time.
I most
I feel
remember
like-
we all really hated Assignment Earth.
Assignment Earth. I was
Yeah.
gonna say, I'm
it
pretty
wasn't
sure
Star
Assignment
Trek.
Earth swept.
Yeah, that show was
Well,
awful.
I know. I'm pretty sure like Turnabout Intruder. It was probably down there too. That's another one that was pretty awful.
Yeah.
I didn't like the one where the punchline was Jesus, but I don't know if.
Oh my god,
I don't know
that
if
fucking
Bread and
episode.
Circuses.
Oh, was that Bread and Circuses? Yeah.
Because
With
I
the
also
prison scene.
Oh yeah, god damn it!
that has one good scene. I fucking hate parallel
Yeah,
development.
but
That's a good
it's-
point. So we're talking about TOS. Fuck parallel
but
development.
it's such a good scene.
But like that's the thing. Like when you look, I don't know if we've talked about this before. We probably have years ago. I don't remember anything. But in like the original pitch that Roddenberry was making for the series, like the parallel development was a big part of that.
Well, that's because it made it cheaper to produce, because you wouldn't have to create
exactly.
sets.
And they even said it's like, yeah, we can use existing sets that we like backlots that we
We can
have.
go to Rome Planet. We can go to
Chicago Planet.
Wild West Planet.
Well, see, but
Planet.
Chicago. See, here's the thing. Like Chicago Planet, I give a pass because that was a Prime Directive issue. Well, no, not even Prime Directive. They wound up with
That's
their hands on
it's
the
a great
book.
episode. I'm not talking shit about.
Like,
the
there's-
rest, just saying.
It just follows
talking
their
about-
rule
right.
that it
Yeah.
allows us to use pre-existing sets because it's inexpensive.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is I'm explaining my frustration is like I should say that I'm not saying all of them are bad, but anywhere there isn't. For me, I want there to be some explanation as to how it happened. Like that planet, the Rome planet annoys me because it's just they made Rome exactly coincidentally.
Yeah, but couldn't that just be like? Couldn't you just explain that with the theory of like infinite universes?
But it's this universe, it's.
Well, yeah, but like there's so many planets.
Yeah, but still, it's
The
then there was-
chimpanzee writes on a typewriter long enough, they eventually write Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
I like when there's like again like Wild West World. I was okay with that because that was an illusion created by an
God, that episode
alien.
was so stupid.
Nazi Planet was a direct violation of the Prime Directive. Chicago was a book.
So really, you just hate bread and circuses.
Also,
and
the
that
stupid.
Native American one.
Yeah. Also in like Miri Planet, which was not just a parallel development, but a literal
Yeah.
copy of Planet Earth,
And
complete
then
with
not
the
explained.
continents.
Oh, was that the fucking annoying baby one, the kid one?
That's
No,
one with the kids.
I thought the
Yeah, fuck
continents
that.
one was the stupid Yangs and Coombs one.
They might have done it in that one too, but
That one I
They definitely
despise.
did it in Miri. The planet that they go
Had
to
the same.
had the same
That's-
continents
yeah.
as Earth.
Yeah, those are. annoying.
Yangs and Coombs sounds like this much too close to some kind of racial slur,
It
doesn't
really
it?
does.
You were like, the one with Yangs, and I was like, what the fuck? Where is he going with this? And I was like, oh, the writers. Yeah. Sure.
That's not a good episode.
Does that make me the
either.
racist? Probably.
Does have a very good appearance from that one guy who was really good at playing crazy in TOS, though. He had previously been like a madman.
Yeah, we bring him up a lot.
Yeah, I forget
his
Dan
name.
Gelder.
You know
Yeah.
what? You know what I always take? I will always keep with me from TOS. Lazarus and that gravy
Oh, the
beard.
gravy
Oh,
beard.
Oh, one of our first running gags.
Oh, Lazarus.
That
Your
beard was bad.
Terrible fucking
It was a
beard.
real bad beard, dude.
It's been so long because I sort of tried to avoid consciously like going back and rewatching old stuff while we've been going through this.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
we watch stuff all the time.
Yeah, no, I've
It
sort of-
really helps with our character spotlights.
I've tried to keep each show sort of as isolated as possible. I mean, like when I went back and rewatched Pegasus after subjecting myself to These Are the Voyages, that might be the first time I've watched a TNG start to end since we finished TNG.
Damn.
Well, as we know, I've rewatched Deep Space Nine like 2.5 more times since we watched Deep Space Nine, but that's it. I don't really go back and rewatch.
But I do really want to kind of go back now and just feel like I don't actually like. It was such a running joke with us, but I don't remember if I liked the episode or not anymore.
Which
Whichever?
one?
The Lazarus one.
No.
No, it was
Oh,
stupid.
no,
it was a
not
bad.
good.
It was an
Terrible
episode as
episode.
bad as his beard.
Okay.
Yeah. Rewatch it anyway, though. You know, why not?
Yeah, I may do.
I want to rewatch Voyager
Yeah, I want to.
because I really liked
I
Voyager.
want to hear what you feel if you do a rewatch of Voyager,
Neelix.
starting in liking Neelix.
Yeah,
Mm.
it's gonna be tough.
Or at least-
I might hate him again.
Yeah, or at least knowing like I see what they're going for, but I'm gonna like him later.
Mm.
I know
With
that.
that
I know by the
knowledge.
end I'll love him. Yeah. Well, I will definitely report back, and I'm sure I will because I did like Voyager, and I didn't expect. Well, I don't know. I guess I kind of expected to by the time we got there because I feel like you and I had seen so eye to eye on so much by that point that I was like, if Ames says I like it, I'll probably like it.
We'll make
And I
this.
believed you about Enterprise, you son of a bitch.
I believed me. No one's more mad at
You're like, I
no
believed
one,
me about Enterprise.
No one is more mad at me than me about Enterprise.
No, it's all right. You know.
We'll make this quick. TAS.
Oh God, Fuck, they
Pink Tribbles, Bem. That's it.
couldn't fucking draw their way out of an episode. Like Jesus Christ,
Oh.
this is supposed to be animated.
And poor
Fucks.
James Doohan. Poor James
Yeah,
Doohan.
I don't know. I think TAS, it's the quality of the animation, as we know, was poor.
It's so distracting.
The quality of the voice acting was very intermittent because they only had 4 or 5 actors.
DeForest Kelly could do it because he had like previous experience voice acting,
Yeah.
and Doohan was fine because he also had experience voice acting. Everyone else couldn't do it.
I will say that not that any of them are well written, but it did feel very much like a continuation of the types of stories.
Some of them,
From
and then
TOS.
some of them seemed like they were for babies.
And then some of them seemed like they were for
Well, they
babies.
were for babies. I mean, right?
I
Was
don't
it
know.
not meant to be for
I
children?
think they really felt that what they were doing was creating the successor to TOS.
Oh, boy.
At the time, they thought they were we're just making more TOS episodes. They happen to be
Yeah,
animated.
it's so hard for me to judge the stories on their own because we're watching it through that horrible animation.
It's so hard
So
to
when
get
I'm trying
past.
to think, okay, there's a story here somewhere. I can't see it because it's not what they're showing us. But if I just listen to it in my crazy brain, I can kind of see, the slaver weapon has an actual, science fiction story arc. Or,
Yeah.
the time trap, I think, was another good one with a science fiction story. It was just impossible to, look at with your eyes.
Well, why don't would this make an interesting 10 forward? What if we got the script from one of the best episodes and the script from one of the worst episodes and read them out and see how it's different when you're not
Interesting.
watching trash?
Okay, so Bem as the worst.
Yeah, obviously.
Fuck that guy.
Imagine if Ben were acted not like a cretin, though.
Mm.
Well, that's the thing,
He's still
too.
really annoying.
Yeah, but again,
Everything
that's
he
his
does.
affectation. That's the acting. If they had sounded differently... Because
But it's not just his
his
voice, though.
design was even interesting. It was an interesting idea to have him be a bunch of different
Yes.
actual little
But
Yeah,
the thing
no,
is,
not that.
aside,
That's gotta
aside
go.
from his obnoxious voice, his actions are still so fucking frustrating.
Yeah.
He's just a dick.
That's fine. A lot of the characters we watch are fucking dicks.
I'm just saying, I think we should do this. I think it
Oh,
would
no,
be
it's a good
interesting-
idea.
An extra,
I just wanna shit on
interesting
Ben.
experiment.
Actually, what would be an interesting experiment to do at some point would be, so there's a couple of, or at least one I know of, there might be more, of fan-produced series that are like TOS
Mm.
with different actors, and it all looks very low. Like I think a lot of them, when I say low budget, I mean like they went all out for like the sets, but from what I've seen of them,
The costumes are t-shirts.
well, no, they I feel like the production quality, especially for a fan produced thing, is really good.
Hmm.
But because they couldn't really
Staff and cast it.
the casts are like
Oh, not great actors.
not great actors, and they're playing like I know there's one where they make fun of the guy that ends up playing Kirk because he's just like he looks like Elvis or something. Like he doesn't have the right look. He doesn't have the right personality.
Who's the they in your sentence?
People
the
that-
other people in the
People,
episode.
people who have watched these.
Ah, okay.
I know it was a meme for a while.
I don't know. Elvis fucked.
That's
people
true.
thought Jim Kirk fucked. He doesn't fuck as much as you would think.
No,
he does
Kirk
kiss a
all
lot.
of his fucking was in the past.
Yeah.
He doesn't do a lot of fucking.
It's
at the
been
time.
3 months, 2
Yeah.
weeks, an odd number of days.
He's all his exes live in
Texas.
Is
Space,
the only
Texas.
person he fucks throughout, actually, there's proof that he had
Carol
sex
Marcus?
with in the course of the show, not pre
No.
or what have you. The slave girl from Bread and Circuses.
Oh, God.
Because he does lots of kissing.
Oh no, wait, the Native American woman. They have a baby, don't
Oh,
they?
that's true.
Yeah.
Miramani.
Miramani.
Miramani,
Okay,
thank
that's
you.
true. That is
Sorry,
right.
fuck
he
Native
wasn't.
American,
But he wasn't
indigenous.
in his right.
But he was
self at the
memory
time.
wiped.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah, but that's less creepy than fucking the slave woman.
That's true.
Lots.
But anyway, yeah, it would be interesting to find some of those fan
Yeah,
series
yeah.
and watch some of those and talk about them.
He fucks the captain's woman in Mirror Mirror, I think.
Do they? They make out a lot.
Yeah.
But I don't know if they actually...
I think we can assume. I think it's between the lines.
I don't really have... Again, I'm watching A's. I don't
Between the
remember if he
lines,
has the
like
time.
this.
Because they're not actually,
Eh.
I think, in the Mirror
It's
Universe.
good radio.
that long.
Yeah.
But yeah, TS, I feel like... And again, I am definitely not rewatching that ever. But...
No.
I feel like there were definitely a few episodes where we're like, that was a decent idea. Shame
Yeah.
it's looks like this.
Yeah, I liked like Young Spock's thing, and I liked Yesteryear and the Siren Song or whatever the fuck that one's called.
Lorelei Signal.
That's it, yeah.
Mm.
Siren Song,
Even if
Lorelei
they
Signal,
did-
same thing.
Fucking...
Yeah, no, fuck
Fuck
Spock.
up
He
the
had
very
nothing to do with
ending.
it. He had nothing to do with it. We'll rewrite that. It'll be better. But yeah, aside from that, that's a great episode.
Yeah, again, as of right now, having only seen 3 episodes of Lower Decks, I will declare Prodigy the most successful animated Star Trek.
I'm curious how you're going to feel about Lower Decks because
Me
as
too.
it was weighing your opinion when writing up all of our blog activities for the series and seasons finale of Enterprise. Hey, check them out on the blog. You'll see that Chris really likes In a Mirror Darkly, which is a camp fun fest full of lots of references, which is what Lower Decks is.
Yeah,
so
that's
you
what-
might fucking love it.
Oh, I might do. For me, again, I really... And I've heard they both get better, but my main issue with the 3 episodes I saw was I did not like either Boimler or Mariner. I mostly liked Tendi and Rutherford. I almost called him Rutger. Rutherford. Like, they seemed very interesting. The other two, like, I just wanted fucking Boimler shoved into the finny tube.
Get jettisoned, bitch.
Yeah, I started off Lower Decks, and again, this was looking to the future when one day we cover these. You're gonna listen to me hate Mariner a lot, but I think she comes around when her character fucking calms the fuck down.
Yeah, that's what I've heard from several people, not just you, so...
Actually, probably sooner than you think, though, because is Lower Decks going to happen
After Discovery,
after
right?
Discovery? So we're only one
Oh, I
series away.
think is Picard before or after Lower Decks? I don't remember
I
where.
don't
I'm pretty sure it's after, isn't
I
it?
thought it was. I thought it started after.
Either way, we are very close to it.
Yeah. Picard's only
Um,
3 seasons. So.
Yeah. Anyone else on TAS, or should we move on to the TOS movies?
I just feel like it's such a wasted opportunity to
Yeah.
use the animated medium.
Yeah, absolutely, because they could have done anything.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, occasionally,
Anything.
occasionally there'll be like a character design. Here's a bird person. Here's a fish person. Okay, but they're just standing stock still because you can't animate them.
Yeah,
And what a
because
fucking
they went with
waste.
the cheapest
Yeah.
option they could for the animation.
Oh,
studio,
Filmation. They were terrible.
which was terrible.
I would love to see them take maybe 1 or 2 of the good episodes, just take the original
Reanimate
audio and give them to animators who know what the fuck they're doing.
I would even take the original. I would recast at least some of the dubs that are really bad.
Shatner?
Maybe.
I mean, here's the thing, like, he definitely was phoning it in the most of the cast.
Yeah.
I kind of
It'd be
imagine that
interesting.
What else is new? Question mark.
it was especially bad.
Yeah. Or at least some of the side characters that
Not have them all be doing.
Yeah, having every side character be Doohan or Nichols got distracting after a while.
Right
Or
now.
Majel. Majel did a lot too.
Majel did a lot too.
Because she was Maress, right?
That's true. Yeah, quick side tangent. I'm listening to a podcast right now when I hike. It's pretty good. It's called The Fourth Ambit. I would recommend it. The only issue is the writer of the podcast does every single voice in the show.
Oh,
no,
that's
you can't
hard.
do that.
Which makes most of them, because he has to differentiate from the main character's voice.
Oh,
It
tell
means-
him to call us up. We'll help him.
Oh,
Yeah.
We
It
recently,
means so many of them are kind of cartoonish.
This is not an audio play, but we recently listened to Andy Robinson's book on tape.
Andy. You say Eddie?
I said Andy.
Oh, I heard Eddie. Jesus.
I heard
My
Eddie.
bad.
I also heard
Oh,
Eddie.
well, if I tried to say Andy, maybe
You said it now. We're all set.
my tongue has failed. But yeah, we listened to Eddie Robinson's book.
Was it good?
It's so good.
It's very good, but he does, because it's just him narrating it. Not narrating, but he's reading it. He's reading the book, but when he gets to dialogue scenes, he has to do voices for characters, and they're not great. Like, he does a great Garrick. He does
I
a
should fucking
shit
hope so.
Quark.
His ROM is appalling.
His ROM is terrible too. So like,
Rom's
love
isn't
Andy
very
Robinson.
Good. Let's be real.
Fair.
Andy,
Poor
if
Rom.
Andy, if you're listening,
We love you.
we love you. We love the book.
It's so
But
good.
for Christ's sake, you should have just called up your friends to come in and like record their own lines.
I know I'm gonna have to get with my next Audible credit. I have to get his book.
TOS movies or just skip straight to TNG? Are they enough their own thing?
I mean, they kind of continued the legacy, and I think, as we're going to talk next week about jumping into the Kelvin universe, keeping things moving, I think, is what the franchise needed.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, your fans forget about you. You start getting really into the comics and the novels, and those go off the fucking rails.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're keeping it. There's a distinctive, as we already kind of talked about, there's a distinct tone shift that happens in the movies from the motion picture, which is very much just like an extended episode in a lot of ways.
With a lot more money.
Stretched the fuck out.
Yeah, an extended episode. Yeah, it's got enough plot for one TOS episode stretched into like a 4-hour film.
Oh, so it's like Enterprise.
Yeah.
It's like a 3-for on Enterprise.
And a scene that fucking traumatized me when I was 8.
Mm-hmm.
Spock fucking Fisher?
And a massive budget. So like it looks great.
It does.
It looks great. Honestly, like if you can accept the fact that you're okay, this scene's going on way too long. It's great. It's fine. It's a fine movie. I don't remember what I said about it at the time, but the more I've thought about it, the more I'm like, yeah, this movie gets more hate than it actually deserves. 'Cause
Definitely.
It's really not bad. It's just maybe not in comparison to the later films, which are just kind of action films in space. It's a different vibe.
There is, however, not enough hate, if anything, thrown at those uniforms.
Yeah, the uniforms are bad.
From us, there is. I think we have compensated and thrown so much hate at those
Yeah.
things.
I like the gray and white.
But it did give
That's the
us-
only good one. The Admiral's uniform is the only good one.
Oh, okay. I like that.
It gave us
You don't
my
like the
very
ball hugger?
favorite, my very favorite Enterprise design in the refit.
Yeah, the refit
Constitution
Enterprise is
class.
great.
So yeah, I appreciate that movie. And then like the later movies, we get sort of a
Largely hit or miss.
largely hit or miss. I mean, we get a trilogy in 2 through 4, which, again, we've talked about this enough, but 2 very successful, 3 not as successful, 4 very successful, 5 shit.
Sure is.
Has some really great character moments.
That's
Yeah.
the thing about 5 is that it's like
Its beginning is good. Like campfire scene, Chekhov being a windstorm, meeting Cybok. It starts off quite good.
yeah.
And then there's just a lot of slog.
I'll say this: it's got the worst plot of the movies.
Find God.
I mean, and even that's not a bad idea. It's just executed really poorly.
I do wonder, if it wasn't for the writer's strike of the time, could they have done another draft and fixed it?
Maybe. I also just think that, I don't know. I don't think Shatner did a great job directing.
Oh, God, no.
Honestly, though, in retrospect, it's got some of the better performances it's unlike, like I feel like
You got a
DeForest
great performance out of Shatner.
DeForest Kelly did a great.
Respect me, sir.
Respect
I
myself.
actually think that Shatner did a really good job in that movie. There's a few scenes like when he's talking about his pain that were like really good acting moments from Shatner.
Excuse me.
And DeForest Kelly, I think, does a great job in that movie.
Oh yeah.
With his like emotional scenes. We've already talked about Cybok and how good a performance that was from
Lawrence
licking balls.
Yikes. Yikes.
And it showcased, I feel like more so than other films, and certainly the series, it kind of showcases some of the side characters more. We, like Uhura gets a scene. It's weird, but it's a scene.
Is that the fan dance?
Yeah, it is.
Whatever, Nichelle Nichols can get it.
Yeah, she did fine. She did great. So yeah, there's a lot to... I'll put it this way. Star Trek V is somehow less than the sum of its parts.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's an interesting way of putting that. I like that.
It's got a lot of elements that on their surface are good. I remember a lot of our character moments for different characters came from Star Trek V. Because there's some good shit here. But somehow when it's all put together, it's just not a good movie.
So maybe it's a problem of editing. Maybe we need a fan edit. Maybe a fan edit could fix it.
Maybe. And honestly, I think the confrontation with God, or the
Shakari
alien, is actually really great. And people make fun of it, but I love, what does God need with a starship?
No, it's a damn good question.
It's a great line.
It's a good fucking
and
question.
And it's delivered well by Shatner.
He didn't ham it up, which is
because
surprising.
He respects himself.
Excuse me. Excuse me.
And 6 is obviously awesome.
Oh,
and 6 is great. 6 is probably objectively the best movie of.
And what a great high note to go out on too. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Well, it's interesting to see it because there were so many things dealing with the same issue at the time, which was so much of our fictional world's identity was created during and tied up with the Cold War, which has suddenly ended. Where does that leave us from a metatextual standpoint? Right. It's an issue that, say, the Bond series has struggled with ever since.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, good news. We feel like we're sort of there again. So
yay! We can finally. Yeah, I remember there was a Wayne's World sketch on SNL that from the early '90s that I obviously didn't see at the time, but I've seen clips of it where they're listing the effects of the Cold War ending, and one of the things that they was no more Bond villains. So yeah, I'm glad we're finally able to get back to good Bond villains.
Yeah, just the Russians again.
I don't know, Le Chiffre was good.
Well, that's because they had one book they hadn't adapted yet that they were able to go back to.
Somehow GoldenEye, they still managed to get the Russians as the villains.
Well, that was again that was their Star Trek 6. That was their it's just ended. We're dealing with the fallout. But then after they dealt with the fallout, they just then went China, and everyone went no. And they went
aliens?
North Korea, and everyone went still no. They still tried to make it communism. It was just
Mer people.
Yes.
Ooh, Atlantis.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. But Star Trek 6 though, back to Star Trek 6. I think a moment ago I said it's objectively the best movie. I meant to say it's arguably the best movie because objectively is less is not. But I think it is. I think. In terms of sort of the complexity of the story and the plot, and I think there is, again, a lot of good acting.
David Warner's a treat.
David Warner's great.
What's his name?
Plummer?
Yes,
yeah, Christopher Plummer.
I almost said Christoph Waltz. It's not right. It's not even close.
Yeah, and the thing I will say, though, is it's the first time I think we get Starfleet is the villain in a sense. Or at least, elements of Starfleet, because we have the conspiracy.
Yeah, that might be our first Admiral.
Yeah.
Previously, when there was someone who was kind of... They were never even really villains, but the worst we tended to have in TOS was, some councilman or bureaucrat who, thought they knew everything. And it was would you sit down and let the adults handle this?
I mean, I guess we've had Admirals on TNG by this point.
because it's overlapped a bit. But they're always ones that they're acting kind of on their own independently, doing stupid things, like Jameson being a dick.
I don't think we thought about this at the time, but I kind of wonder how much of the sort of the Badmirals of early TNG and Trek 6 are kind of a direct response to the Iran-Contra affair. Yeah. I don't think we thought of that at the time, but now it's kind of obvious, actually.
Well, it's because they're military. Like, because remember, well, I think
he's Colonel West.
Colonel
yeah,
West. Like,
that's right.
I think we did talk about the fact that he was Colonel West.
Yeah.
The Rene Auberjonois character from.
But yeah, I imagine maybe that's kind of why we start getting Badmirals after the mid-1980s.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's just kind of almost a running gag at this point where, like, an admiral shows up and you're like, all right, how long till they're corrupt?
Oh, right. He's Section 31.
There we go.
Yeah, which is why, like, it was somewhat refreshing, I'll say, of Enterprise that we had Admiral Forrest, who was actually a good and decent man and wasn't secretly a Badmiral.
No, that's true. That's true.
Or at least died a hero
as far as we know,
before he could become the villain.
Yeah. Because, I mean, well, you know, segueing to the 80s and 90s, TNG. Like, let's be honest, for a lot of people, this is where Star Trek starts.
Mm.
Like, I'm not even just saying people like who are our age where that was kind of the incumbent one, but I think even for older fans, like, if original Trek was but part of original Trek was making people realize that science fiction could be made on television for, you know, sort of all audiences, this one was even more serious, for lack of a better term. Like, it tried to eschew, you know, any kind of that sort of TOS camp reputation.
Mm-hmm.
Even that, obviously, to an extent, the films had also eschewed, but still, as a television outing, you know, they maybe overdid it sometimes with their like almost pathological fear of even referencing TOS at first, except for when they directly remade an episode poorly.
Their second episode.
Yes. But aside from that, I know that, like, in the early days, they had originally wanted to maybe not reference it at all. But then they, of course, had Forrest Kelly show up and did the remake.
And Scotty.
That was much later, though. By then, they were a little less leery about admitting that Star Trek existed.
Yeah. There was that giant writers' room turnover between seasons 2 and 3.
Thank God.
That we covered in Chaos on the Bridge.
Yes.
Yeah, I think, you know, everyone gives credit, or not credit, but everyone talks about how, oh, you know, Marvel and their cinematic universe is like some new thing, you know? It's like, fucking Star Trek's been doing cinematic universe since the 80s.
I actually saw a headline recently, and it was like, you know, sorry, Disney, the ultimate shared universe now is Star Trek. It's like, now?
It's always
Were you there in the 90s when there were 3 fucking shows at once?
And like, the fact that... And Star Trek fans are the most rabid about canon. So, like, literally, it's probably to the detriment of the franchise that they are constrained by 50 years of shared content, shared universe content. Like, they have to go out of their way to tie the J.J. Abrams movie, which we'll be watching, I think, next week, back to the original Star Trek timeline, when they could have just said, "Oh, we're just remaking the thing with the, you know, just doing a remake." But no, we got to keep it in the universe. And then, you know, you get shows like Lower Decks, where it's a fucking animated show, and somehow we have to tie that in with all of its goofy jokes and stuff.
Yeah.
So so TNG really kind of starts that. Their decision to not just make it a remake or a new series that's unrelated started the ball rolling. And I'm glad, for the sake of what we got, and at least that era of Trek, that they made that decision, especially that it led to having DS9 and Voyager kind of coexisting in a shared universe.
What made TNG so popular? Because, you know, it's coming off of TOS's success in syndication and the movie's successes that they do TNG, but it's such a different tone of show than TOS.
I think it's just there wasn't, at the time, in that period in the 80s, I just don't think there was sci-fi on television very much. I don't think it was, like, after TNG we started getting sci-fi more on television. Like, the 90s had a ton of great sci-fi, but I think there was just a hunger for it.
Well, I think, like, yeah, because you'd had, probably by that point, you didn't have a space opera.
Right.
You know, I think, like, you'd had at least some Quantum Leap by that point.
I don't know.
But that's a very different show.
Quantum Leap is early 90s.
I thought it started in the...
It might have started like 89, but it was not before TNG.
Huh, really? Wow. Oop, that is not how you spell that. Oh yeah, wow, 89. So yeah, there wasn't even that. Jesus.
Yeah. So I mean, there may have been some sci-fi shows out there, but they were not. They were either kid shows like Transformers or whatever.
Or it was Star Wars ripoff like Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah, or something. Yeah, right. And even that was, that ended in '80. So there had been a not much going on, and Battlestar Galactica was a kid show too.
Yeah, that's the original. Yeah, very much so.
But here we have an adult show, or I guess a family show, because everyone can appreciate it, I guess. But it's a show that's taking a serious look at these topics, and I don't think there was a lot of that at the time. And because the Star Trek movies, it wouldn't have been successful without the prior art of the movies and show. But so I think that like got people interested in it, and then
I mean, you have people who hadn't seen the original series or the TOS movies could jump into TNG.
Yeah, I don't know how much of that would have happened though. Like,
really?
Especially in '87, like
okay, so you're saying as TNG was debuting live, most people tuned in because they knew Star Trek.
Yeah,
the original series.
I think well, Star Trek would have certainly been a part of the zeitgeist, and I think a lot of people were familiar with it. So
and then they start getting their kids into it, and they can probably start like the kids on TNG.
Well, yeah, I mean, we are those kids, right? Like I know. When I was little, I watched Star Trek: The Next Generation because my parents were fans of the original series. So we watched it as a family. And like honestly, for kids, they did great with toys and
like, ooh, fun, yeah.
Yeah, like I got a ton of them right here. These are all toys that were available at the time.
And plus, there was such a relatable young person.
Oh yeah,
in the show. Golly, Tasha, why would anyone do drugs?
Every 5-year-old boy just wanted to be a Wesley Crusher.
It really, like, I will say, they are lucky they got to do more than those first 2 seasons, because holy shit.
Yeah.
Like, there's a couple highlight episodes, but so much of it is, like, people tell you the first season is bad, but oh my fuck, they do not tell you how.
No, it's worse
bad.
than you think.
It is painful.
Well, it's painful for us because, again...
Well, yeah, we live with a whole different set of, like, rules and...
Well, we know what seasons 3 and beyond are.
We also just know what good TV
We know it gets better.
I feel like at the time when this was all you had...
Yeah.
You look at... I always love going back, and I've talked about this before, like watching like news footage of the Star Wars Phantom Menace premiere, where they were interviewing people coming out of the movie, talking about how awesome it was, how amazed they were. Oh my god, it was so good. It's Star Trek's back, or Star Wars is back, baby.
I saw that fucking movie 5 times in theaters. I thought it was great when I was 12.
We were those fucking people. I fucking loved episode 2. I saw that a shitload of times. I snuck out of work to go watch that in like the middle of the day once. So at the time, the point is, in the moment, you don't always see how shitty it is.
And also, again, I guess comparing Star Trek 66 to its contemporaries, like, again, like I said, it just wasn't science fiction, or at least definitely not a space opera of that kind, at the very least.
Yeah.
And, this was like, it was what you either watched was on television, or you read like a dork. And you even think, like, late 80s, even VCR was still pretty expensive.
Oh, yeah.
And a cassette was pricey. Like,
oh, yeah.
Chances were you were just watching what was on television, and really, again, you wouldn't even say, let's just watch this movie we own. It's like, it's either that or you read or you go to bed. Or you play your 8-bit Nintendo, which was also very expensive at the time when adjusted for inflation. It's weird to think that was only like 40 years ago, and there were just so many fewer entertainment options.
Yeah.
But TNG gave us a lot of the villains and stuff, the aliens that we would see later. Yeah. Q to a lesser extent, though he does show up, over and over. The Borg, obviously. We get the Ferengi. We get the Cardassians. Romulans, they're back.
I'd argue that TNG really cements the Romulans and Klingons, because in TOS we get glimpses of them, but they don't really feel like a people.
Yeah, we get 2 episodes that feature Romulans? Is there more than just Enterprise Incident and
those are the big 2, yeah.
Yeah, like TOS Klingons were just the Russians. They were an allegory for the Russians, and that was it.
With some shoe polish on their faces.
Yeah, and the Romulans, as I've often said, like the unfortunate Orientalism of 60s Trek, like the Vulcans were the Asian countries we were allied with, the Romulans were the communist Asian nations. Yeah, like I said, it brings them back. It actually gives the Klingons a bit more of a culture. The Romulans become the Romulans that we know and love. These weird, conniving, bizarre, self-defeating mad bastards whom I love.
Did I already mention the Borg?
Yes.
Yeah, I do love Borg, because Borg is like... Borg, I think, as a concept, like, blew people's minds at the time. Like, we talked about Best of Both Worlds and how, like, that was, like, a cliffhanger, like, people hadn't seen before.
Yeah.
And they had to wait months. That's the worst part. You had to, like, wait months until that shit came back.
Right.
The only downside being then Star Trek decided every season finale practically had to be a cliffhanger. And it's like, guys... With the exception of that one DS9 season where they just kind of set up the next season, but the story itself did conclude, which was
like
good.
A lot of, like,
Was that season 6 into 7?
No, that was 3 into 4, 4 into 5?
Something like that.
Yeah.
But I feel like so many... Like, when did the big cliffhanger season ender really begin?
Dallas. I think that's probably the big one, right? Who Shot JR?
And then everyone was doing that kind of shit.
Yeah, but I feel like when you think about, like, the big season cliffhangers, like Who Shot JR and Best of Both Worlds,
and Who Shot Mr. Burns?
Well, and Who Shot
Yay!
and Where's Dewey was another one.
Sorry, which one?
There was a Malcolm in the Middle one.
Where's Dewey?
Oh yeah, I forgot about Where's Dewey.
I mean, I think that was mostly big because they tried to, like, make it a whole multimedia thing.
Did they? I forgot about that.
Do you have to go searching for him on the internet?
Yeah, I think so. I think there was, like, internet
so, like, early
tie-ins.
ARG.
Yeah.
Wow.
Good stuff.
But also being a comedy show, they could also be also a semi-parody like Who Shot Mr. Burns.
Yeah, it was very tongue-in-cheek.
But, like,
those
are the big ones. Those are the ones that, like, remain in the public consciousness to this day. So.
Yeah, like, I feel like without... Like, Dallas obviously really kicked off, but I think, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot more shows started doing it after Best of Both Worlds as well.
Yeah, and now I feel like most, like streaming shows don't really do the big season, like, finale cliffhanger. It's because most seasons now are very contained because they don't know if they're going to get picked up again for the next season. So they make it kind of contained, and maybe we'll leave, like, a little trinket at the end with maybe next season this, like a Prodigy did.
Yeah, which is fine. I prefer more seasons just conclude.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's what they're doing now because of the nature of how they're being released.
Yeah, because, like, if you want me to come back, give me a good show. Don't, like, trick me, you know? Like, oh, now you gotta come back to see how it ends. It's like, no, if your show is good enough, I'll come back. If anything, I resent that you need to, like, play this fucking game with me.
I mean, that said, Best of Both Worlds is great.
It's
a great use of the cliffhanger.
I think it was less, again, I feel like it was less sort of just we do this because we have to gimmicky bullshit thing. Like, at the time, they kind of meant it, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, and now the fact that it concluded with a wet fart is...
Yeah, it's a whole different thing.
Different issue.
Yeah.
It wasn't that bad.
I mean...
It was just clearly not as good as the first episode.
No, that's true.
Which, as we have discussed over the years, Star Trek does kind of have a problem having a satisfying...
We're going to cover those on a future Blogtivity.
Are we?
Peep 2.
Great!
But yeah, and I think, back to just TNG more generally, I think that it gave us certainly some of the best episodes of Star Trek.
Like sci-fi ones.
Sci-fi episodes, stories... Inner Light, Darmok, and even like the moral question stories, like the little morality plays, Drumhead, Defector, yeah, like these episodes, Ethics.
Yeah, even Ethics, that's true.
These are just good stories.
Using science fiction as a lens.
I think so, and a comparison that I've made before is like TNG is really a science fiction show, and it's a plot-driven science fiction show. And you have characters, and some of them are interesting, and they sometimes do interesting things, but the focus of the story is by and large on the plots and what happens in them, and that's fine.
Well, and that was very much a result, as we discussed, of those early edicts of like no interpersonal
Right.
tension on the ship.
Yeah, Gene laying his hammer down, saying everyone's friends.
And even after he was gone, like by then they'd already sort of just established that everyone was friends, so you couldn't just suddenly do a 180 on that and be like, well, now we're gonna have. So they were kind of stuck with that tone, even as they were able to soften it.
That's why I think like some of the episodes that are more memorable are the character-driven episodes.
Face of the Enemy.
Face of the Enemy. I'd say
We love that
any of
one.
the Broccoli episodes, even right? Like
That one where Data learns to do comedy.
oh god, no.
I do. I stand-up for me has always been. It's one of the few where she gets to do a lot. Is Remember Me.
Yeah, Remember Me. I'd even say the Pegasus, right? Which is kind of interesting because both.
If you ignore Enterprise.
Yeah, again,
ignore the Enterprise, ignore the sequel.
Being the one TNG episodes I've seen recently, really good episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's a good point. Like the TNG stories are very much stories, and the characters, as Gene kind of like scrawled them on napkins and shit, the characters themselves aren't that interesting.
No.
Like, they don't have arcs. They just kind of have basic personalities written down for you.
Yeah, they're the players in these stories, and there are some interesting characters. I think they spend time establishing some of the characters. Data, Picard,
mostly Data.
Data and Picard. I feel like get well established. The other characters are just kind of there. We know some about them.
We know Worf's one trait: bad father.
Yeah, terrible dad. Yeah, I mean even Worf gets a fair amount of character development through the Klingon stories.
Yeah.
But those are the exceptions. Most of the episodes in that series are, here's a crazy alien thing that's happening. How do we deal with it?
Yeah, and I mean, in a lot of ways, a lot of it was sort of, TOS with better special effects and more money, relatively speaking, and a more skilled captain actor.
Yeah.
Said it, Bill.
Contrary to popular perception, Picard fucks.
Oh my god, so much.
A lot more than Kirk.
Yeah, like baby Picard and adult Picard. Like,
Yeah, always fucking.
Like, he's slowed down a little at this point, but not tons.
No, he's getting like that.
He claimed he didn't want to go get laid on Risa, but
he wanted it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Who fucks more, Picard or Riker?
Oh, Riker for sure.
Mm.
But Picard doesn't get the credit he deserves as a fuck machine.
Yeah, again, if anything, like we always talk about Kirk drift, there is not anywhere near as bad Picard drift, but the idea that he is like a fridge is the one thing. It's like so weird that, again, him and Kirk wound up with one another's reputations in some regards, for lack of a better term.
Right.
Yeah, it's like I know a lot of people will say in the TNG movies that suddenly Picard is an action hero. He kind of is just returning to his roots.
Yeah.
Like there's always been the hints that he's capable of all these kinds of wacky shenanigans. Kiss the lady, swing from a vine. But I feel like it is all there.
Yeah, and also that is also just a side effect of the fact that, again, the movies kind of tend to lean more into the action realm, for good or ill.
We'll see what we think about 2009 next week.
Yeah, I don't think I ever, even in the series, I don't think I ever would have said that Picard was like an action hero type. But he's certainly not the, by the book kind of guy that, again, popular perception would have you believe.
I mean, they did do Die Hard on the Enterprise.
But again, it wasn't like he was outsmarting the villains.
Yeah, true.
And setting them up for failure versus blasting them with a Tommy gun.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Which he does later.
Which he does later to different villains while screaming and smashing them.
Okay, he was also having a small emotional breakdown at that moment. So,
True.
It doesn't come completely out of nowhere.
Yeah, I mean,
he's mad. It's the symbolism.
But I do think that the one, when people talk about Kirk versus Picard and how Kirk's like a rebel or whatever, he doesn't fit the mold, and then you can say, but Picard, he's so proper and he always does exactly by the book. No, Picard disobeys orders all the fucking time. He's always mavericking out there doing some mavericky thing, Whereas Kirk is like a fucking nerd for
Yeah.
fucking regulations.
Like, he goes out of his way in Romulan 1 Enterprise Incident to make sure he's the only one who's doing something
Illegal,
not quite
yeah.
by the book to save the rest of his
Yeah,
crew's
he
reputation.
treats everybody like a dickhead the whole show while he's setting it up.
Yeah, well, that was also to set up, like, a plausible deniability.
Yeah, that he was
thing,
defecting or whatever
yeah.
the story was.
But that's the thing, but that was kind of the point, was like, it's this guy, like, what's going on? Like you said, like, the fact that he steals the Enterprise in 3 is a huge deal, because this is not something he would normally do.
Mm.
The fact that he's doing this is actually shocking.
Well, in Star Trek 3, like, Kirk drift had already begun, I feel like.
Yeah,
He
but...
had already started that road.
True, but I feel like, people I think look at that as like, look, he doesn't follow the rules. It's like, that was actually his first really big rule break, though.
Yeah, and it was a big deal.
And it was, I mean, don't get me wrong, as far as our first one goes, he went big.
I don't know, his first one was approaching the Reliant without shields up, when they had not established contact.
That's true. That's true.
As Savick rightly reminded.
That's a good point. It's a good point. That's getting lackadaisical.
Get him, Savick.
Too comfy.
Yeah, TNG. TNG's a good show.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, DS9, what's interesting for me for DS9 is that, unlike actually a lot of people our age, my first Star Trek was TOS, catching reruns of that. And so when I started watching more Trek later, and I think I mentioned this at the time, but like, I think I first checked out TNG when it was in, like, I want to say season 6.
Wow.
So for me, my sort of formative spin-off Trek was DS9. That's the one I kind of caught from the off. So if that explains my tastes, maybe, like TOS and DS9 were kind of what I grew up on. TNG got filled in later. And it's such a crazy show when you think about it. Like, it's so different than anything that came before, while still being recognizably the same world. But it's funny in that, like, even for the time and place it was made, you're like, where is this coming from? Because, if there's one thing, we talk about things that have sort of aged poorly about TOS, TNG, I think what is a little more, in your hindsight, we look at it now, where, like, a lot of it occasionally feels like sometimes the resolution is very much like sort of comfortable 90s liberalism, for lack of a better term. Which, as far as changes go, like, that's not bad. Like, it just means we progressed further even. And even then, I feel like a lot of their conclusions aren't necessarily bad. We're just like, that's not the whole picture, but okay, fair enough, you meant well. DS9 is so surprisingly, like... Because again, when it's formed, it's the mid-90s, it's the Clinton years, it's fat days for America, things are going great. So to have this show that's about, like, ends up being about, like, a world coming out of this oppressive occupation, and then it turns into this mad war scenario, like, it wants to tackle some very, very mature ideas. Again, not the other ones didn't, but it's the kind of stuff that they didn't touch as much. Like, there's more sort of... I mean, again, our first officer is a former terrorist.
Yeah.
Like, that's fucking crazy. Well,
also, like, just how much they, like, religion was
Yeah.
the central theme of the show.
Yeah, which is something, Roddenberry tried to avoid, because he believed much more in just sort of general humanism, which is perfectly reasonable. But, this is a separate culture for which religion was a big deal, and, in the real world, it still is for a lot of people, so it makes sense to address it in the show.
I think one of the things that, contrasting it with what I discussed earlier about TNG is that DS9 focused a lot more on the characters and building, like, depth to even like the characters who at first glance just don't seem that important. I'd say like someone like Rom, right? Who we don't really love Rom, but they built him up as an interesting character with interesting backstory, or Nog even, just.
I mean, Nog's arc is one of the best things that show does.
Oh, yeah.
Not that
absolutely.
they had any idea where it was going when they
No.
first came up with these characters.
No.
When you look at, like, the character sheets for, like, the pilot episode of, okay, here's our pitch for what these characters are going to be, you have no idea what's going to happen to any of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it shows a maturity of the writing staff on that show that they were like, let's spend the time to make these multi-dimensional characters, all of them, and even going so far as to make Cisco a flawed individual.
Yeah.
Like, and that is something that they did know right off the bat. But basically, I think perhaps Emissary is perhaps the strongest premiere episode.
We're going to talk about premiere episodes in another Blogtivity, so
Perfect.
hold on to that, Jake.
I will,
and wait for me to disagree with you.
Fair. But the thing that I think that's interesting that establishes is the animosity that he has towards Picard because of Wolf 359.
That was a ballsy move.
Which is a ballsy move, and which I can appreciate. And it's something that, he's, as a person throughout the series, he's got a lot of rough edges and baggage. And I just don't think you would have seen that on TNG or TOS. So I appreciate that DS9 had the balls to like give us a captain who wasn't, a perfect image of modern Major General.
Yeah, we have a doctor who's a little fucking brat.
Yeah,
like he's a conceited, like, egomaniac who doesn't consider the people he's there to treat. He walks in, dick out, saying, "Oh, find frontier medicine."
How can I make myself famous? By fixing your problem.
I'm under 30, you know.
Yeah. Yeah,
Soon
frontier,
I'll be an old maid.
Frontier medicine. And meanwhile, Kira's like, this is where I live? Like, this isn't the middle of nowhere. This is here.
Oh,
like,
Kira, it is the middle of nowhere.
It's like, I'm far from Earth, but close to me. As far as I'm concerned, you assholes are the frontier.
Yeah, it's interesting because it eventually does kind of become a frontier once they discover the wormhole.
True.
But he didn't know that when he signed up.
No, he did not. And but what's great, though, is that the show immediately sets him up as an idiot, not as a prick, we're not supposed to go, yes, you're a good guy. We're supposed to look at him and go, oh, I can't wait to see you get your knees knocked out.
You're kind of a creep.
Like, I feel like, looking ahead, they would have written him in Enterprise and where we would be supposed to like him like that. Not like seeing him chill the fuck out over the course of several years and become a better person.
And the other thing, I think Deep Space Nine, develops their characters the best of any of the shows. Because, TOS, you kind of develop the hell out of Spock and Kirk and Bones a little bit, but, everybody else kind of gets left behind. And I feel like in Deep Space Nine, everybody gets to develop. Obviously Cisco, Jake, both literally, growing up into, near adulthood and, becoming a real person.
And also becoming 7 fucking feet tall.
And, again, like you guys said, Nog. I mean, Nog's transition from, ne'er-do-well, illiterate prankster to fucking war hero, who loses his leg in battle. Everybody has their chance to, grow and shine. Yeah, and I really think that's, one of the best things about that show.
Yeah, imagine if TOS had an episode dedicated to a bit player that, normally was just there to kind of, bolster your hero characters. Shatner would revolt and...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Riley doesn't get an arc.
No. It's shocking he gets a second episode.
Yeah.
So DS9, it also introduced something that we hadn't seen really in Star Trek to this point, which is a long-form storytelling across multiple episodes and seasons.
Serialization.
Yeah, it's not serialization in the sense of find out next time on Star Trek.
Yeah.
It's but it is an overarching storyline that with characters that are recurring and come back in and out. It gives that level of serialization lets you still have your one-off, single episode arcs, which they do have, but the fact that we sort of have this other larger story happening at the same time lets us develop the villain characters.
Yeah, villain characters that we never really got before.
Right. So we have obviously Gul Dukat and Kai Wynn and Wei Yun. We have all these interesting villain characters that we just learned to love to hate.
Yeah, I don't think on TOS we ever saw a guest character come back as the same character. Other than
Harry Mudd.
Oh,
once.
That's true. We got Harry Mudd once just because he was around the set one day. So yeah, there's the one, and I can't think of any others. I mean, sure, they recast Pulaski as two different people, but she was supposed to be two different people.
Yeah, we got a few come back in TAS.
Right.
Yeah, but no, within the show itself, like I said, I mean, we saw Pulaski as two different people. We saw Gothos as a Klingon.
Yeah.
Things like that. But yeah, no, I don't think we really had any.
Yeah, and then in
TNG has a few.
TNG has a few, but they're always Tomalak's back. Not because he's a character, but because they have a Romulan head for him.
Yeah, and I guess the closest probably you get to a true recurring villain in TNG is Q.
Yeah.
Where it's it makes sense that he's coming back and stuff. But yeah, the fact that I think that they wanted to make Tomalak like a real adversary for the series. They didn't commit to it.
No.
Not in the same way that they committed to Dukat.
Yeah. Even with Q, there's not really a bit of a huge through line between his episodes. There, you get maybe one a season, and it's always him coming and doing shenanigans. And the finale and the premiere have a through line, but the rest are just random Q stuff.
Q is, for all intents and purposes, Q is the Harry Mudd of TNG.
Well, he's very much in that he's sort of the classic trickster god figure who just shows up and does weird shit, and you're like, why? And they're like, hee hee, and you're like, okay, sure.
Yeah, I mean, even if he weren't, if you take away his god powers, he's just really a guy that shows up at your ship, ruins your day, and makes you have to deal with whatever bullshit he's doing.
He's an inciting incident machine.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that.
I think, and again, it's not like you say, it's not a villain in the sense. He's just doing goofy shit.
Yeah.
He's an antagonist. He's not a villain.
Exactly.
Yeah. Whereas,
and then we even get characters like Damar, who are villains with a really interesting redemption arc attached. Which is something we don't see.
And then of course Kai Wynn, where it's the opposite. You sort of feel I mean, not that she starts out good, she starts out terrible, but she gets worse, and she completely goes from being this, really pious, devoted, servant, well, sort of, I mean, as devoted as she can be. She's really trying. I really think she's trying.
Oh, she is.
Devoted servant to the prophets, and goes full, actually, I'm hanging with the Pa-wraiths and killing people to, get, I don't know.
Well, what makes her really interesting, too, is, there's, one or two times where she almost gets it!
Yep.
Which is, honestly, even more interesting, because so often villains in television and film are just,
they're their own heroes,
bad.
Always.
Yeah.
They don't have to have these moments of, introspection where they almost figure it out.
Yeah, she comes so close once or twice, whereas Dukat's just...
She was so good.
Dukat, and I mean, I love Dukat, but he is just...
bad.
Dukat is about what is best for me at all times.
Yeah, and he's entirely blind to all the stuff that's actually happening because he's so focused on himself.
Yeah, and that's what's great about him is even though he does some big shifts throughout the series, the shifts are a direct relation rather to his what is best for me at this time. His shifts aren't illogical for his character. They make perfect sense for his character.
Yeah, the other thing that there's this cliche that every villain is the hero of their own story, but I think for Dukat, it's really real. He really thinks he's the good guy.
He so does.
And all these things that he's doing, all this fucked up shit.
Because he saved the Bajorans from being weak little bitches. I mean, didn't you know that?
Oh yeah, the Bajorans. they were they needed me. I saved more Bajorans than I ever caused death of.
Yeah.
If it hadn't been me, it would have been somebody much worse, and I did the best I could. It's you're still a fucking Nazi asshole.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure Hitler thought he was doing a great job too,
Right?
He spent most of his time high on meth, so who knows what he was thinking at a given moment.
Meth? Are you sure?
I did the 40s.
High on something.
40s, some sort of amphetamine.
I mean, they did give German soldiers meth.
I think most of their like higher ups were also.
Probably.
Well, Goering was on like bajillions of morphine pills every day.
Oof.
I don't remember what anybody else was taking, but everybody was taking something.
Damar was just a drunk. For a
Just
while.
a drunk. That's bad enough, you know.
Such a departure, but it's because of course you couldn't just do TNG again because you had TNG.
Right.
So it's like, all right, so we've got TNG, which again is sort of like it's the optimistic, more utopian future. You know, we're exploring. It's a space opera. It's this. Like, all right, so we need to do something different. So now, what happens when this world comes up against a world that is not that, for lack of a better. How does Utopia navigate sort of harsher reality? And then I think what you have with Voyager to segue
when we're
smoothly.
when we're gonna do TNG again?
Well,
Yeah.
then the idea is sort of like I think to an extent they got a little frightened because the reactions to DS9 were very varied, but they were like, all right, but still we need something kind of different. So what happens when this society is isolated and has no one to turn to? And
But let's keep that terrorist first officer thing. That was good.
We
Let's
liked
keep
that.
that.
but make him the world's nicest terrorist.
Yeah.
He's like a Canadian terrorist, you know?
Yeah. And, we've talked about how, like, it is often unfairly sort of judged as, like, what it didn't end up being allowed to do, which, admittedly, some of these ideas would have made it better.
Who, Voyager?
Yeah, I'd love to see a Voyager produced today. Like, that might be interesting.
Yeah. But I think even with
That's just
that...
Battlestar Galactica, isn't it? Son of a bitch.
Somewhat.
But, what happens when, again, your ideals are not only up against it, but you don't necessarily know that you'll ever have to answer for it. Do you actually try to still be you, or do you become Jonathan fucking Archer?
Start waterboarding motherfuckers.
And so I think they do occasionally address that, and I think it works. And overall, like, this was when I went into... I remember, I'd watched the first bunch of seasons live when I was a kid, and at the time I wasn't into it, and I'm really glad I went back, because I liked it a lot more as an adult.
Yeah, I had never seen any of it until we watched it, and I, again, was pretty pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
Again, is there, a lot of garbage? There's some garbage.
Yeah, it's Star Trek, of course. It's
even-
inevitable with
even-
every series.
Even Deep Space Nine has, Run Along Home and whatever that shit is with the clowns. No, wait, the clowns is Voyager.
That's the Voyager.
Okay, the Julian Bashir in his own head
Oh,
and
God.
Oh,
getting
God.
all the
Voices.
Twice.
different voices.
Son
Yeah.
of a bitch.
There's plenty. They have some trash. I think they probably have the least trash of the series also, but I'm super biased because I'm obsessed with the show. But Voyager had some really great stuff, racism notwithstanding.
Yeah, I mean, the elephant in the room.
And it's funny too, because I was about to say, and there really isn't that much racism in any of the others. That's not exactly true. Obviously, Code of Honor, or whatever the fuck, that
Oof.
TNG episode is pretty rough. Was there, actually, going back, was there really much racism in TOS, that I'm just not remembering?
I think it was just so white focused that they
Yeah.
didn't have anything to be racist about.
I think any of it was that sort of just the inherent just kind of biases of the time as opposed to necessarily malicious. I mean, again, the Klingons...
As opposed to, can't your people turn into birds?
Well, exactly.
And again, there was a fair bit of Orientalism when it comes to the Vulcans.
But
which,
again-
unfortunately, is because that
Yeah,
sort
but
of...
not in a Mr. Moto sense.
No,
yeah.
It wasn't, there were no...
It could have been worse. Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I won't even say what there wasn't any of.
Yeah,
but there
the
was...
Native American episode, I think, is probably the closest we get to that.
Yeah.
In what, Voyager?
In TOS.
Oh, in TOS.
The one-
Yeah. But even... yeah.
Even then, that was, I think, less malicious and more just not doing sufficient research
Yeah.
before
plus
writing
too,
the episode.
And I'm not trying to forgive anybody at all, but I even kind of and obviously if you're an indigenous person, you've always cared probably a great deal about the mistreatment of your people, and rightly so. But I also kind of feel like I didn't hear anyone talking about giving a shit about indigenous people until around the time Trump was elected.
Yeah, it was. I feel like there were.
So I'm not saying that makes it okay, but I feel like it wasn't the hot button issue or whatever.
I vaguely recall people trying to make more people care when I was a kid in the 90s.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. It didn't catch on as well as it could have.
I think it's always just, it's uncomfortable for Americans, particularly, to address it because we're the bad guys. Like,
yeah, and that's why it's hard.
Are you teaching CRT in classrooms?
Right.
Are we bad?
Well, right.
Are all white people the bad ones?
Do you think we're the baddies?
Well, I think the way it had been dealt with, at least my entire life, was, oh, we'll address it by talking about all of the good parts of Native American culture and lifting up that culture.
Yeah.
We're not going to talk about
why they're in this
why
state.
They're in this shitty
Yeah,
place
that's a
right
good way
now.
to put it.
We'll just talk more about them and we'll celebrate the culture.
The Pocahontas-ification of society.
And like that's great. I think it's a good thing to talk about the culture, but we can't not talk about the fucking genocide.
Yeah, really. And by the way, we killed a bunch of them and drove them across the country to the wastes.
And I think, it's also because, like...
And still, like, I know we're not actively today genociding Native Americans, but we're still not treating them very well.
Yeah, a lot of our rules and laws and shit still put them in a very tough position. Yeah. And again, I think a huge issue also becomes like, I don't know, what do we do? Because we basically, how do you address, we effectively succeeded in a genocide.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I do not know how you not fix. There's no fixing.
Yeah, really. But like, sorry about that, guys. Here's
like, how do you apologize for that, or how do you what do you do to undo it? And I'm sure there are smarter people who have ideas, and I'm sure they're out there. But again, it's not something anyone's going to want to discuss, or at least people in power aren't going to want to discuss because they're perfectly happy with things the way they are. But yeah. Back to Voyager, the unfortunate. Again, like that right there. Just allowing a known flim-flam man continue to be a con artist and an actual Native American advisor.
Mm-hmm.
Like, good God.
But so they knew he was full of shit?
He'd already been exposed by then.
Yeesh.
But
do you think that they just didn't do their research and they didn't know?
No, it's just him and Rick
were like, we don't care.
Him and Rick were friends and Rick didn't care.
Oh, gross. Rick Berman, you suck. You scared off Jadzia by being a fucking disgusting creepazoid. You fucked up the the indigenous people episode.
And then everything about Enterprise.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
I also
really.
think that... So another issue I have with Chakotay is not just like the bad cultural references, the obvious shit, Akuchi Moya. It's the fact that they deliberately created this character who's has Indian heritage, and he's from ostensibly he's part of the Maquis, who we know from Journey's End.
No, yeah, Journey's End.
Journey's End was formed in the aftermath of this
treaty, the Cardassian treaty.
Well, and this
expelling
forced relocation of fucking Indians from that planet. So we're now in Voyager. We have this character. We could tell stories. We could explain why Chakotay joined the Maquis. Even it never comes up.
No,
we never get. All we get is, he's actually just a model Federation Starfleet officer.
Yeah, like I said multiple times, this is a man who would have written strongly worded letters.
Yeah, what a wasted character, a wasted opportunity to talk about this shit.
Yeah. But when they did, if that all hadn't been there, you have this guy who is just a really good, like I said, representative of the ideals of the Federation and Starfleet. Yeah. Which in a way kind of almost could go to explain why he joined, because he maybe feels like Starfleet is betraying its own ideals.
Yeah, but I don't mean when we do have Chakotay focused episodes that focus on his culture and his heritage, it's fucking bullshit like Tattoo.
Yeah, no,
that just ruins it.
Yeah,
and why not? Why can't we have an episode focusing on Chakotay that's talking about why he joined the Maquis? They could establish that he came from that colony or a similar colony or something, and it's like, yeah, my people have been fucked over by people that look like you, Catherine, for hundreds and hundreds of years, 800 years, more probably, right? More, right? 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue.
very nearly 1,000 years by that point.
For 1,000 years almost, people that look like you that are not you, but
But you do all look alike.
have been fucking us repeatedly. We went to fucking space to get our own place, and then you still came in and fucked us again.
Them and the only whiter aliens.
Right. So...
I mean, they're sort of gray, but they're much gray.
I mean, I don't think he needed to lecture
No.
Janeway that way, but it would have been nice to
Yeah.
give Robert Beltran something to do,
Yeah.
Anyway, I do really like Voyager.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, I think, I feel like with DS9, the reputation of both shows has improved over the years.
Yeah.
DS9, I think, hugely, as we may have talked about, benefits from, you can sit down and stream it at your own pace.
Right, so you're
know.
not missing episode 2.
Yeah, so you can more easily kind of follow the various threads. Voyager, I think, you have to get past some of the early bad character writing for Neelix to get to good Neelix.
And I think that actually benefits to see a character rise.
Yeah.
Because then you notice, he's actually quite good now. Well,
Yeah.
if he'd been the same character throughout, then you'd feel like he was another character getting no
The
development.
thing is, though, to contrast sort of Neelix's arc with, say, someone like Nog. Like Nog's arc is well written. The transition from punk kid to Starfleet officer, Starfleet cadet, still a little rough around the edges, still making
Red Squad.
and all the way to where he ends up in the end. Whereas with Neelix, it's just like the writers decided, okay, we're gonna, once we got rid of the Kess character, we have to come up with some new shit for Neelix, and we'll, do this other stuff.
Well, I think what it was it was research that they realized some of the character traits they'd given him were bad ideas.
Yeah.
And instead of having them grow out of them, they just dropped them.
They just dropped them, which I'm like, it's lazy writing.
Yeah.
It was for the best. I mean,
Yeah.
I like where Neelix ended up.
Yeah.
It would have been nice if they had spent, taken the time to develop that character
Yeah,
more
like maybe
naturally.
an acknowledgement in universe that he behaved that way previously. Because even some of the core elements of him that are good are there from very early on. Because that episode where he meets the war criminal is very early on.
Mhm.
When even he is still green-eyed fucking Neelix sometimes. You're just like, ugh. But yeah, no, all fairly, again, unfortunately a lot do get sidelined and underused. But when they write their characters, they're all very interesting.
Mm.
Yeah, they definitely turn another page when 7 of 9 joins the
Yeah.
cast too. Like they realize, there's actual stories to tell now.
Mm-hmm.
For the longest time, it was I think they were stuck in the Lost in Space. We're heading home, but we still have an adventure every week. But there's still this kind of through line that we'll have these items from the well we can dip into for the getting home stuff. And I think it's when they hit Borg space that they're like, oh no, there's stuff to do here, guys. We've got all these Borgs to play with, and I always like Borgs, so I'm happy. And I never thought Borgs were overused. I thought they were used exactly how Borgs should have been used in the Delta Quadrant where they fucking live.
Yeah, I think it all... Because I remember that, too, going in, like, people saying they eventually overused the Borg, and I was like, this seems pretty reasonable.
Yeah, they're always telling new things about Borgs. I love meeting our Borgling friends. I'm someone who normally hates child actors. I loved these kids.
Well, not the creepy twins.
I didn't mind the creepy twins.
Really? I found them creepy. Yeah. And Janeway's great.
Janeway's great.
She's nuts. I love her.
She gets to go full Janeway every so often, and you're like, yes!
I'm gonna blow up the ship!
Tank top Janeway on the case!
In a lot of
Oh,
ways.
yeah, when she becomes Ripley from Alien.
In a lot of ways, Janeway is the most Kirk
Yeah!
of the captains.
Shit,
Yeah,
I think
she's
you're
very
right.
brash.
She does a lot of fucking.
Does she?
She sure does. Are you kidding me?
She does a lot of fucking?
She gets.
She fucks a hologram.
She
Deletes the
gets a
life.
boyfriend. All.
Yeah, she got
everywhere
the Prime
goes.
Factor's boyfriend.
Prime
she got
Factors.
She was definitely fucking...
Counterpoint.
the counterpoint guy.
Which
Yeah.
one's counterpoint?
The bad. He turns out to be a shithead who's.
Oh, yeah, they
It's
definitely
it's
fucked.
the Uno reverse, double Uno reverse.
Oh,
Yes.
that guy when
She-
we were all
she
were
was-
like, is he gonna be good? Nope, he's bad.
She was definitely fucking the guy with the super transporter in the Reverse
Oh, yeah.
Prime Directive episode.
Yeah. Prime Factors.
Oh, Prime Factor. Yeah, I brought that one up.
Sorry.
Workforce, although she
Oh,
wasn't
yeah.
in her right mind. She had a boyfriend.
She definitely would have taken him if he'd said he would.
And he
though.
said, and he offered even.
'Cause
Yeah,
she
that was a
still has
bummer. I
those-
liked them together.
She still has those memories.
She has
when
the
they're
memories.
done. So man,
Yeah,
yeah.
she might have the most like relationships of any of the captains that we see.
Yeah.
Cisco has a couple, but
2.
one of them. And
Well, Jennifer dies.
Jennifer dies.
He
Cass-
briefly sees the girl in the white dress or
Red.
the red dress.
the red dress, who turns out to be a figment anyway, but
Yeah.
or projection.
And then
or
Cassidy.
whatever. And then Cassidy. Yeah, well, that's what I meant.
And Mirror
couple.
Jennifer.
Yikes.
Oh no.
Jennifer again.
Mirror Dax.
Ugh.
Mirror Kira.
Ugh.
Get back to Janeway.
Mirror Kira fucks herself too, though, to be fair.
True.
She fucks everybody.
Yes, she does. Everybody.
Voyager made the good decision of not having a mirror episode.
Yep.
Their version of it, though, great way to do
Living
it.
Witness.
Yeah.
So good.
That was such a good way to do
So
it.
smart.
Because again, even as someone who loves the Mirror Universe, like, not having to work within the existing Mirror Universe was great for them. They got to do a different kind of evil universe. And I think the fact that they eventually, in Picard, have the black shirts under the uniform jackets is them admitting that looks better than the weird sort of light gray. Now they just need the gloves. Which, I mean, let's be honest, they should be wearing gloves on away missions way more often than they are.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And well, because when they do,
Full
someone's going
hazmat
to take it
Is
off
to scratch his
to
face.
scratch
That
his
fucking
face
idiot.
and get space drunk.
Oh, dumbest man in space, which is saying something. Yeah, but yeah, good show. Good show. It has a great sequel.
Yeah.
Enterprise?
Prodigy.
Oh.
Prodigy's pretty much a sequel to Voyager.
That's a good point.
And then Enterprise.
No.
I was
my
gonna say, but
God.
speaking of Enterprise, what a pile of
what
shit.
what a choice. What
So-
a choice to decide. Let's go prequel. Okay, I kind of get it. But let's make everyone assholes.
I mean, we did just shit all over Enterprise
Yes.
a couple weeks ago, but
But Caitlin didn't get a chance.
That's true.
To be part of the final summation, so the floor is yours.
Wow.
Both the finale and just general as you'd like.
It's another one that I feel like just had so much potential. And instead, like, we got really inconsistent, weird character shit. We had, like, Phlox, who I really think they were trying to make, like, a Neelix thing work somehow, but, like, it was never gonna work. And the misuse of so many of your characters, like, talk about tokenism. Like, you've got a black actor and an Asian American actor. They're on your bridge. They could be huge. You barely use them. What the fuck? And you let the fucking white men run the show for the most part as usual. And then, like, the total fucking opposite of, like, we're gonna get through the Cold War and World War III and everything horrible that's coming. It's like, nope. In fact, just like how people really did, at least in America, like, we're gonna lose our fucking minds because some terrorism happened and we're gonna use it to justify every terrible thing we do from now on. And that's not Star Trek. Star Trek that should never be Star Trek. Like, waterboarding should never be on the fucking table for Star Trek. Not ever. Not even in Enterprise. Like, by then I feel like we should be beyond that shit.
Yeah, if people complain now that, like, oh, Discovery is so dark, oh, Picard is so anti the hopeful future that Gene envisioned, Enterprise was doing it already, and you'd never caught it.
Nobody
You missed
watched it. Yeah, I was gonna say it's because nobody watched it.
And again, and I think we'll get there, but I feel like, as I said, the whole point is I think you can argue they do pull themselves out. Whereas Enterprise is just like, no, this is what we should be doing. And you're like, I'm sorry, back the fuck up, what? Fucking what?
Yeah, and then Soval walks in and says, nope, you humans were right all along. Thanks, Soval. God damn it.
You were the one voice of reason in the room. I didn't like you because you were a jerk, but you were often right.
I like that he was a jerk.
yeah, it's
That's our main.
Vulcan.
Yeah, I like him.
Yeah, the ambassador.
Yeah, he's good. I like
yeah.
him.
I think
He gives Archer all the shit Archer deserves.
Somebody's
then-
got to do it. Damn.
But then after season 3, he's like, no, you were right. And he's like, God, son of a table flip.
so. Here's the thing, if Archer were in, say, Voyager's shoes and Janeway's shoes, he would have been Captain Ransom of the Equinox.
No, he would have been Max.
He would have
Yeah.
tortured the caretaker.
Yeah, because that's right. He wouldn't have, because at least Captain Ransom has like a redemption and feels bad about it. No, Max. Yeah, he would have.
Max
been
is the one egging it on. Max was definitely like into all this.
Yeah.
Max is probably descended from fucking Archer.
Right? And also Max gave us fucking BLT.
Oh, how did she not break his nose over that?
Maybe she likes BLTs. I like BLTs.
I still wouldn't want to be called BLT.
What was BLT again?
It was
Her-
his nickname for
B'Elanna
Torres.
Torres.
Oh god, it's stupid.
Yeah, fuck that guy.
But yeah, anyway, yeah. I think you nailed it pretty well, Caitlin, with your assessment. I'd also like to just add, also Enterprise has the fucking decom chamber.
Oh yeah,
fucking
God,
terrible.
fucking.
But
hate
you know,
that.
we didn't see it as much as I thought we would. Like
That's
after
true.
it
After
shows
the
up the
first-
first like episode or whatever
We've
it
seen
was.
a few times in
Yeah, a
the
few
early
times.
seasons, but
But-
yeah, it does largely disappear.
But don't worry, they switched from the fucking decon chamber rubbing blue goo on people.
Oh, it's a sex massage.
Constant neuropressure massages with T'Pol.
I was alright with that. She's like, Trip, why don't you get naked? And he's like, well, Paul, why don't you get naked? And I was like, all right, why don't you invite Caitlin to the party? Let's go.
Dearie dear.
But like, and honestly too, like, I feel like this is the one series where I don't feel like we necessarily had more good than bad. Like, I feel like every other series, if you put it together and looked at the numbers and said, okay, this episode sucked, but this episode was great, or this episode was good, and I didn't really like this episode, I feel like most of them, your good column is going to be taller than your bad column.
And they're more memorable, too.
Absolutely.
The goods are memorable.
Well, and part of the reason why Enterprise is not memorable is because they have these fucking terrible three-parters that aren't long enough to be three. They don't have enough to be a three-parter, and it all just becomes like super convoluted. And you're like, which convoluted mess was this particular interesting thing
Romulans
attached
again,
to?
somehow. Every week.
Yeah,
I want to get one last dig in at the prop design as well.
Oh god, yeah.
So bad, so astoundingly bad. Just, oh.
I love when Chris has feelings about aesthetics.
Still like the ship.
Ship's good.
Yeah, it's
I like
not
the
bad at
ship
all, really.
design.
I like
She's-
pockets.
Pockets are good.
The
Yeah, I
shuttle,
don't
the
mind
shuttle
uniforms.
pods are super cute.
They are.
I like that they eventually gave T'Pol a real uniform, even if it was still like.
Still a tit uniform.
Well, I mean, listen. Here's the thing. She's got tits.
I know,
They're
but
cut.
it-
They're
it's-
cut pretty much the same for like.
I don't think her orange jumpsuit that she has on like the later seasons is definitely.
Is that Starfleet issued though?
Yeah, it's Starfleet issue.
Oh, it is.
Well, I don't know. I mean,
I don't know. It's got the patch, but it's not. No one else wears it. It's
Right,
very
it's-
strange.
it's-
Look, if
like-
if she's choosing to dress like a hoe, that's fine.
fair. Well, she was certainly when she was like a, Vulcan advisor or whatever her original role was. She just was wearing whatever her Vulcan uniform was, which was like also skin tight.
That first one, she looked like she couldn't breathe.
Yeah, I'll also say in Enterprise, because I knew from the get-go, from when we first started doing this podcast, how much Chris loves Trip. And why shouldn't you? And I walked
Trip
in,
is great.
And I walked in thinking, like, I don't know, the southern accent, I don't know if I can get on board with Engineer Florida over here. But then he turns out to actually be, like, a very consistent and lovely character. I'm like, God damn it, Connor Trinneer's so good at this.
Well, and unlike
and how I like him.
and unlike John, he has character growth.
Yeah, he's able to, like, after the attack on Florida, have his anger, as you would.
Yeah, I
And
get
then
it.
at some point grow. And
Trip's a grower and a shower. Isn't it nice?
He gets beyond his rage. Oh boy.
And then he sacrifices himself like a fucking idiot.
for the
God
worst man in
damn it.
space.
Also, this is the one thing that I wish, I know I said it to you guys, the last episode, everyone's like, John, it's the biggest day of your life. You're giving a speech. He went to fucking space. This is not the biggest day of his life. Are you shitting me right now? You're gonna go give a fucking speech in front of a bunch of assholes at Starfleet or whatever? That's the biggest day of your fucking life?
It really would be like telling Neil Armstrong that any other day
Yeah.
was
really.
the biggest day
You
of
were
his
on
life.
the moon.
The McRib is back!
Biggest
And the
day of my
Shamrock Shake. Do you know they never come together? This is like if Passover and Easter are on the same weekend. It just doesn't happen.
I think that happens relatively.
It happens like not infrequently, but I mean like it would be like I don't know.
God, I do wonder if anyone ever had the balls to be like, hey Neil, how much would we have to pay you to say that getting our product is now the best day of your life? Oh, God, what a terrible show. I apologize. I don't know why I
Well,
thought
again,
it was
it's
good.
not. You don't have to apologize. You didn't write the show. I mean, you didn't say, I want to do a podcast about Star Trek so we can eventually get to my favorite show, Enterprise. You were just like, we should have a podcast about Star Trek. Oh, and by the way, that includes Enterprise, which I do like. You know?
Yeah.
There was been plenty of good to outweigh the bad. And
That's
yes, like, Enterprise is the sour taste that's left in our mouth because it's the most recent thing. But don't worry, we'll be watching Into Darkness in a couple of weeks, and that's, I mean, arguably maybe just as bad.
At least
I don't know because I haven't seen it since I saw it in theaters.
At least it's only 2 hours long-ish. Unlike Enterprise, which...
I think was about
Oof.
3 decades of time.
Season 3 certainly was
It has aged me.
But yeah, that era of Star Trek is at an end.
Well, it's sad, but I'm also happy because it means Enterprise is over.
Yeah,
So,
it did end on a wet
swings
fart,
and
but everything
roundabouts.
else was good. Well, and TAS was there.
Oh, God. I'm very curious what I'm going to think as we discuss when we get into, like, Discovery. Because I haven't rewatched that one since it first came out. And just remember being exhausted by it. So.
Well, and again, I'm now coming to Discovery having seen everything else. Whereas at the time, I had seen whatever I'd seen of DS9 and Voyager and TOS, and well, I don't remember where we were in the show when Discovery finally launched. I think maybe in the middle of TNG.
When Discovery launched?
No, we were still TOS.
Yeah, it was super early.
Well, yeah, wow. So that's what I mean. So I've now seen all of the Star Trek that existed.
Actually, we released the 2 first episodes, so I think we were in TNG.
Oh, were we?
Yeah, I think it was early TNG. Because we did a special 10 Forward on just the first 2 Discovery episodes.
That's right.
Yeah, I know we did that.
So yeah, I think might have been the TOS movies. I think it was in the TOS movies that we did that.
Maybe. That sounds right.
That sounds right.
So yeah, we'd only done TOS, so it'll be interesting to see what I think now. At least the early, obviously season 5 only recently ended, and so it's really interesting to see what I think of the first season now. Because again, I've not rewatched it since it aired, so it'll be interesting. But yeah, so this was actually rather successful. I'm glad. I wasn't sure what the hell was going to happen.
Oh, it's still long. How did we talk for so long?
We just did.
Well,
Son of a
because we
bitch.
talked about the original series for about 6 hours. That went on forever.
That did go on for a bit.
But the thing is, though, this whole time I was like, "Holy shit!" That was his opening question. Does he have this kind of question for every series? Like, I was like, or rather, do you have more questions?
I had other stuff, but none of it's important because I think we kind of touched on what I was going to try to lead us to with those anyway. So that was more of a, if this didn't happen the way it did, I had these backup things, and I had backup things just in case. But luckily, none of that was necessary.
Cool.
Don't worry.
Good
You
for
and
us.
Jake will talk at length about any Star Trek bullshit. So
True.
we're good.
Yeah.
True facts.
And you folks, for some reason, enjoy to listen to that, and we thank you.
Oh, you kept all that.
So thank you for joining us. Next week, regular episodes resume as we dive into Star Trek 2009, the first of the Kelvin Timeline trilogy.
Ooh.
So look forward to that. Thank you for joining us. As always, follow us on Facebook and the Tumblr, sshbpodcast.com. And on your favorite podcasting application, we do live on SoundCloud if you want to follow us directly there. So thank you again. This has been Chair.
This has been Ames.
This has been Caitlin.
This is always Jake.
Live long and fuck off.